At Christmas dinner, I was trying my best to enjoy the meal, surrounded by family, the sounds of laughter, and clinking silverware. Then, suddenly, my grandfather's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "Still renting that apartment, Sophia?" My heart dropped. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. I could feel the warmth of my mother's hand squeezing mine under the table, a silent plea to stay calm. I've been in the family long enough to know when the game was on. Grandpa Richard, the billionaire real estate mogul, always had something to say about how I was living my life. I had always chosen a different path, following my heart into education, teaching kids who actually needed help instead of diving into the family business. And in his eyes, that was the ultimate failure. I wasn't the heir to a real estate empire, and I wasn't building wealth the way he wanted me to. But what they didn't know was I had built something worth more than anything money could buy. I wasn't about to let him make me feel small again, not this time. But in that moment, as his disappointed gaze locked with mine, I froze. This wasn't just about an apartment. It was about everything I had sacrificed for the life I believed in, and everything they thought I could have been. Could I stand my ground this time, or would I crumble like I always had before? Before I could even think, I stood up, setting down my glass, and said, "Actually, Grandpa, I have something I want to share with everyone." The room went silent, and in that stillness, I knew I had to speak my truth. Before I tell you what happened next, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of this story. You won't want to miss it. I remember the first time Grandpa Richard offered me that downtown condo. It was right after I graduated college, and it came with a catch, a real estate job in his billion-dollar empire. It seemed like an easy decision for everyone around me, except for me. "You'll be set for life, Sophia," Grandpa had said. "You've got the brains. I can show you how to make it big." But I wasn't interested in playing the game the way he wanted. Instead of accepting his offer, I chose to follow my heart and pursue teaching. I went to school to become an elementary school teacher, not a real estate mogul, and that choice seemed to rattle my family. They never let me forget it. Grandma Caroline was the first to make her opinion known. She'd sit in her chair at family gatherings, eyes narrowed, always watching me. "Teaching? Really, Sophia? You could have so much more if you just worked with Richard. Instead, you're stuck in a classroom with kids who don't even appreciate you." Every word from her lips was sharp, coated with disappointment. She didn't get it. She didn't see the value in what I was doing, not like she saw the value in what Grandpa was building. "You're throwing away your potential. It's such a waste." Her words stung every time, but I took them in stride. After all, I was doing what I loved. But that didn't stop the constant judgment. Every holiday, every family dinner, I was reminded of my decision. Each time we gathered, Grandpa would look at me with a mix of disbelief and pity. It wasn't long before I became the black sheep of the family, the one who didn't follow the golden path they'd all paved. I could feel the weight of their expectations on my shoulders, a pressure that would never ease. It wasn't just my grandparents, it was everyone. Aunt Caroline would always ask me, "When are you going to stop playing small, Sophia?" It felt like I was in a constant battle to prove my worth, not just to them, but to myself. Then came that Christmas dinner. The question Grandpa asked, "Still renting that apartment, Sophia?" cut deeper than anything before. I froze. My hands gripped the edge of my glass so tightly I could feel my fingers turn white. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried across the table, over the conversations of my cousins, my uncles, everyone. And in that moment, it wasn't just a question about my living situation, it was everything he had ever thought about me. I wasn't living up to his expectations, and he made sure everyone knew it. I could feel the heat rise in my face as everyone's eyes turned to me. Aunt Caroline's gaze was filled with pity. Brandon, my cousin, smirked into his napkin, knowing this was the moment to strike. I couldn't escape it. It was like being boxed in, cornered by years of disappointment and family expectations. They all expected me to fall in line, to live the life they thought I should live. The pressure was suffocating, and it was all I could do to keep from breaking down. My heart raced as I tried to find the words to defend myself, but the truth was, I was tired. Tired of constantly feeling like I didn't belong. Tired of being the disappointment. It wasn't just Grandpa anymore. It was all of them, every judgmental glance, every word of criticism. They didn't understand me. They didn't understand why I chose to live the way I did, but it was my choice. And in that moment, I realized something. I had to make them understand. I couldn't live my life trying to meet their expectations any longer. In the silence that followed, I set my glass down carefully, my hands trembling. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to speak. "Actually, Grandpa," I began, and the words flowed out before I could second-guess them. "I have something to tell everyone." The room fell completely still. Last month, the school district asked me to lead a new literacy initiative for underserved communities. It's a 3-year program with a $200,000 grant, and my salary just jumped to $95,000. I also won the National Teacher Innovation Award, which comes with a $50,000 prize and a book deal. I looked directly at Grandpa. As I said the last part, his eyes had softened a little, but I could tell he still didn't fully understand. But I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let him make me feel small anymore. Here was the truth I'd been hiding for so long. I was doing something that mattered. I was building something that would last. I had made my own path, and it wasn't about money. It was about making a difference, something Grandpa hadn't truly understood until now. But, I continued, feeling the eyes of my family still on me, I'm still renting that apartment, and I'll tell you why. Every month, I take the money I would have spent on a mortgage and property taxes, and I put it into a scholarship fund, the Sophia Richardson Foundation for First-Generation College Students. I could feel my chest tighten as I spoke. In 3 years, I've funded scholarships for 12 kids. Marcus is at MIT studying engineering. Destiny's at Duke, studying pre-med. Chen's at Stanford studying computer science. They all wrote me this week to say thank you. My voice wavered slightly as I slid my phone across the table. I pulled up photos of my scholarship students, their smiles shining through the screen. You taught me that wealth means nothing if you don't build something that lasts. You built a billion-dollar company, Grandpa. That's impressive. But I'm building futures. The tension hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable. I could feel the weight of my family's eyes on me, each one judging, expecting me to shrink, to falter. Grandpa's question echoed in my mind, louder than any of the others. "Still renting that apartment?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment, but deep down, something inside me snapped. For years, I had been the one to retreat, to let their judgments slide off me, but this time felt different. It was as if the years of criticism had finally piled up, and I could no longer keep quiet about the life I was living. I was tired of hiding, tired of being made to feel like I wasn't enough because I didn't follow the same path they had. Grandpa might have wanted me to feel small, but this time I was ready to make him and everyone else see me for what I truly was. I slowly set my glass down, my fingers trembling slightly. I took a deep breath, collecting my thoughts. The room was dead silent now, the clinking of silverware and murmurs of conversation replaced by a thick stillness. I wasn't going to let this moment slip away. I wasn't going to let them make me feel like a failure. I had worked too hard to be dismissed with a question that meant nothing to me anymore. "Actually, Grandpa," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I have something to tell everyone." I could feel the shift in the room. The air seemed to hold its breath. I wasn't sure how they would react, but I had already decided. It didn't matter anymore. "I've been asked by the school district to lead a new literacy initiative," I continued, steadying myself as I went on. It's a 3-year pilot program for underserved communities, and I was awarded a $200,000 grant. My salary increased to $95, and I also won the National Teacher Innovation Award this year, which comes with a $50,000 prize and a book deal. There, I said it. I could feel the weight of the words hanging in the air. I had never really talked about it with them. I had kept it to myself, unsure if they would ever understand what I was doing. But now I needed them to know. I needed them to see me, really see me for the first time. The shock in their eyes was unmistakable. Aunt Caroline, who usually looked at me with that same pitying expression, was now leaning forward, genuinely interested. Brandon's smirk had disappeared, replaced by a look of confusion. But I wasn't finished. I leaned forward, my hands steady on the table, and looked directly at Grandpa. "But here's the thing, Grandpa," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'm still renting that apartment, and I'm okay with it. You know why? Because every month I take the money I would have spent on a mortgage and property taxes, and I put it into a scholarship fund. I've created the Sophia Richardson Foundation for first-generation college students." The words felt so natural, so right. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I paused for a moment, letting the weight of it sink in. In the last 3 years, I've funded full scholarships for 12 students. Marcus is at MIT studying engineering. Destiny's at Duke studying pre-med. Chen's studying computer science at Stanford. These students, Grandpa, they all wrote to me this week to thank me. They're coming home for the holidays because they finally have hope. I'm not just teaching kids, Grandpa. I'm giving them a future. My eyes scanned the room, and I could see their expressions shift. Aunt Caroline, who had always judged my choices, was now leaning forward, her interest piqued. Even Brandon had stopped smirking. But it wasn't just the reactions from my family that mattered. It was the fact that, for the first time, I was speaking my truth. I slid my phone across the table, the photos of my scholarship students filling the screen. They were smiling, happy, proud of what they had accomplished. "You taught me that wealth means nothing if you don't build something that lasts," I continued, my gaze meeting Grandpa's. "You built a billion-dollar company, and that's impressive, but I'm building futures. I work summer school, I tutor on weekends, I do consulting. Yes, I live in a small apartment, and I drive a 10-year-old car. But at the end of the day, Grandpa, I sleep well at night. Can you say the same?" The silence in the room deepened. It wasn't awkward or uncomfortable, but rather, it was the kind of silence that comes with a moment of realization. I could see the wheels turning in Grandpa's mind, his eyes locked on mine. I wasn't sure what he would say, but I knew this was the moment everything changed. I wasn't asking for approval anymore. I wasn't asking for their validation. I was telling them who I was, what I had achieved, and why it mattered. It was my time to be seen. It was my time to finally stand up for myself. And I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. Before I go on, if you've been following this story so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay with me till the end. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The room was still. My words had just settled in the air like dust, and I could feel the weight of it. The silence stretched on, thick with the unspoken thoughts of everyone around the table. Grandpa didn't say anything right away. His eyes were locked on me, but there was something different now. It wasn't judgment, it wasn't disappointment. For the first time in as long as I could remember, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Confusion mixed with something else, perhaps even admiration. My heart was still racing, but now I felt a strange sense of calm. I had finally said what I needed to say, and it felt like a weight had been lifted. Then, without a word, Grandpa slowly stood up. Everyone's eyes followed him as he made his way around the table. I thought he might say something, maybe argue or dismiss me like he always had. But when he reached me, something entirely unexpected happened. He didn't say anything. He just pulled me into a hug. It was a long, silent embrace, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just his granddaughter. I was someone who had earned his respect. His voice, thick with emotion, broke the silence when he finally spoke. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I've been a stubborn fool. I didn't get it. I didn't understand what you were doing or why it mattered, but now I see." For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, unsure of how to respond. The man who had built an empire, who had spent decades focused on wealth and success, was telling me he understood. And not just that, he was apologizing. My throat tightened. This wasn't just an apology. It was a recognition of my choices, my path, and the person I had become. He wasn't seeing me through the lens of disappointment anymore. He was seeing me as someone who had achieved something on her own, something that mattered. When we finally pulled apart, Grandpa cleared his throat. The room was still holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. He looked around at all the faces at the table, at my Aunt Caroline, Brandon, my mother, and he began to speak again, his voice steady but carrying a new weight. "I've been thinking about my legacy a lot lately," he said, his eyes softening. "What I've built and what I'll leave behind when I'm gone. And you know what, Sophia? It's not enough just to have money, not if you don't use it to make a difference." I could feel the shift in the room. This wasn't the man who had questioned my worth just moments ago. This was a different Grandpa, one who had come to realize that his wealth, his empire, could be used for something far greater than just building more buildings or expanding his business. He pulled out his phone and, without missing a beat, typed something quickly. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down, surprised. "I just transferred $500,000 to your foundation," he said, his voice now filled with conviction. "And I'm setting up a matching program. For every dollar you raise, I'll match it up to $2 million annually." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at him, unable to process what he had just said. I'd never expected this. But then he dropped another bombshell. "That apartment you're renting?" He paused, looking almost sheepish. "I was going to buy the building and force you into ownership as a Christmas gift. But after everything you've shown me today, I've changed my mind. I'm buying the entire building and I'm converting it into affordable housing for teachers, below market rent. You can stay there or move. It's your choice. Always your choice." I was speechless. The room, which had been tense only moments before, was now stunned into silence. I had never expected this. Grandpa, who had always been about wealth, about status, was talking about something entirely different now, something about giving back. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time, he wasn't just seeing wealth as a measure of success. He was seeing it as a tool to build something bigger, something that would last beyond him. The shift in Grandpa's perspective was profound. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the future, about creating something meaningful with the resources he had. And for the first time, I realized that his legacy could be more than just a collection of properties and bank accounts. It could be a legacy of change, of impact, of helping others. Before I knew it, I was smiling, a real, genuine smile, not just because of the donation, but because I had finally been seen. Not just as the granddaughter who didn't follow the family path, but as someone who had created something of her own. And in that moment, I knew everything had changed. Not just for me, but for the entire family. Grandpa had seen the value in something I had built, not with money, but with heart. And that was worth more than anything I could have ever imagined. As I looked around the table, I knew this was just the beginning. Grandpa had finally come to understand what true wealth really was, and the ripple effect of that realization would last far beyond this Christmas dinner. 3 months passed since that fateful Christmas dinner, and I still couldn't quite believe everything that had changed. Grandpa, the man who had once scorned my choices, who had never understood why I chose a life of teaching instead of wealth building, had become my biggest supporter. I remember the first time I saw him walking through the door of the building I rented, now the building he had bought. He walked in with a smile, his eyes scanning the space where the teachers now lived. It had been converted into affordable housing, and now, instead of students struggling to find a place to live, teachers could live in peace without the burden of overpriced rents. "You did all of this, Sophia," he had said to me, his voice filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time: genuine pride. Grandpa had become more involved in my work than I'd ever imagined. He had set up a matching donation program for the Sophia Richardson Foundation, pledging to match every dollar we raised up to $2 million annually. His commitment wasn't just financial. He wanted to know the students whose lives were being changed. Every few weeks, he would meet with them, offering advice, encouragement, and even mentorship. It was as if he was trying to bridge the gap between his world of wealth and my world of making a difference. He didn't just want to write checks. He wanted to be part of the change. He often sat with students, listening to their stories, offering them the same kind of mentorship he had once received when he was starting out. His eyes, once cold and focused solely on business, had softened. He was no longer just interested in leaving behind a legacy of buildings and properties. He wanted to leave behind a legacy of lives changed, of futures shaped, of opportunities provided. The building that had once been a symbol of my struggle had now become a home for 15 teachers, people who had dedicated their lives to shaping young minds, just like I had. These teachers, some of whom were from struggling backgrounds, had a safe space to call home, where they could focus on their work without the constant fear of financial insecurity. It felt like something larger than just a building. It was a statement. It was proof that wealth, when used for good, could change lives in a way that simply accumulating more of it never could. My scholarship fund had also grown. In those 3 months, we had been able to fund scholarships for over 30 students, some of whom were now in college, some still waiting for their chance. Marcus, Destiny, and Chen were just the beginning, and every single one of them sent me letters, emails, texts of thanks, all telling me how much my support had meant to them. They were no longer just faces in a classroom. They were real people, achieving real things because of what we had built together. And yet, despite all the progress, it was one conversation with Grandpa that struck me the most. We sat in the newly renovated building one afternoon, looking out at the city. "You know, Sophia," he began, his voice quieter than usual, "when I built my empire, I thought I was building something that would last forever. I thought that the only way to create real success was to accumulate wealth. But now I see that it's not about money. It's about the people you help along the way. You taught me that." His words hit me harder than any donation he had made, harder than any amount of money in the bank. He wasn't just acknowledging what I had done. He was acknowledging a fundamental shift in his own thinking. He realized that his success wasn't just about the empire he'd built, it was about the impact he could have on the world. And in that moment, I understood something important. My choice to follow my heart, to teach, to invest in the future of students instead of in property had led to something far greater than I had ever imagined. I had found a deeper, more meaningful kind of success, a success that wasn't measured by bank accounts but by lives changed. As I sat there, I reflected on how far we had come, how far I had come. I hadn't set out to prove anything to anyone. I hadn't started my foundation to change my family's opinion of me. But as I looked at the students who were now thriving because of the scholarships we had created, as I saw Grandpa's transformation from a man obsessed with wealth to one obsessed with giving back, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories are the ones you never saw coming. My choice to follow my heart, to believe in something bigger than money, had changed not just my life, but the lives of so many others. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I had finally proven to myself and to Grandpa that wealth wasn't the measure of success. Impact was. I had built something that would last far beyond any property or business. I had built a future, and that, I realized, was the true legacy we all should aim for. Easter dinner was always a time for family to come together, but this year felt different. As soon as I walked into the dining room, I could feel the tension in the air. The usual pleasantries were there, but it was clear that something was off. Everyone had been talking about the changes Grandpa had made, and I knew I was the topic of conversation behind closed doors. I wasn't wrong. Brandon, my cousin, had been seething since Christmas, and today he finally confronted me. "You know, you really played Grandpa like a fiddle, didn't you?" he said, his voice dripping with bitterness as he set his fork down and glared at me. "All this talk about the foundation, the scholarships, now he's giving you millions. You've got him right where you want him." I didn't flinch. I had expected this. Brandon had always been competitive, always looking for ways to tear me down. He had never understood why I chose to walk away from the real estate empire. To him, wealth was everything, and he resented that I had found success without it. "Brandon, I didn't manipulate Grandpa," I said calmly, meeting his gaze. "What you're missing is that he didn't just give me money because I asked for it. He changed his perspective because he remembered what it was like when someone believed in him, when his teacher saw potential in him, when no one else did." Brandon scoffed, clearly annoyed. "You really think he's doing this because of some teacher? He's a billionaire. He did it because of you, because you've convinced him you're the only one who gets it. I don't buy that for a second." I could feel the anger rising inside me, but I kept my voice steady. Grandpa's transformation wasn't about me manipulating him. It's about him rediscovering what really matters, what legacy means. He didn't just want to build an empire. He wanted to build lives. And if you don't see that, maybe it's because you've always been too focused on what you could get out of it. The table fell silent. I wasn't sure if anyone had ever confronted Brandon like that before. He opened his mouth to retort but hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. My Aunt Caroline shifted in her seat, her eyes darting between Brandon and me, and I could feel the tension building. She had always sided with Grandpa's way of thinking, but today she didn't say a word. It was like the whole room was waiting for something to snap. But I stood firm. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate how I felt about my choices, not even Brandon. "I didn't set out to change Grandpa's mind," I continued, my voice quieter now. "I did what I believed in, and it happened to resonate with him. But what's important is that it's making a difference. We're not just talking about money, we're talking about real lives, real futures. I'm proud of that. If you don't get it, that's okay. But don't make it seem like I'm the one who twisted Grandpa's arm." Brandon finally leaned back in his chair, his face flushed with frustration. He didn't say anything more, but the look in his eyes told me he wasn't ready to accept what had happened. I wasn't sure if he ever would, but I didn't care anymore. I had spent too many years trying to make myself fit into their mold, trying to please them, trying to prove I wasn't a disappointment. Now I had finally found my voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. The conversation shifted after that, though I could feel the undercurrent of judgment still flowing beneath the surface. Some of my relatives continued to look at me with skepticism, while others, like Aunt Carolyn, seemed more open to understanding what I had done. But the most important thing was that I knew my path was the right one for me. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. I wasn't trying to be accepted by anyone who didn't see the value in what I was doing. I had made my peace with that. I had found a purpose, a legacy that went beyond their expectations. And no matter what Brandon or anyone else thought, I wasn't going to apologize for that. As dinner continued, the atmosphere didn't completely return to normal, but something had shifted. Grandpa had opened a door to a new way of thinking, and while not everyone was ready to walk through it, I knew he had taken a step in the right direction. The foundation was growing, the students were thriving, and even Brandon couldn't deny that something powerful was happening. It wasn't about manipulation, it was about change. And that change, no matter how much they resisted it, was something I was going to continue to nurture. As the months passed, life didn't change in the ways I had expected. I still drove my old car, and I still rented my small apartment. But now, there was something different. A sense of peace had settled over me that I hadn't felt before. I wasn't chasing approval anymore. I wasn't concerned with impressing anyone. My life had found its own rhythm, one that wasn't dictated by family expectations or financial wealth. Every day, I woke up knowing that I was building something lasting, something that mattered. The scholarship fund continued to grow, the foundation was making a real impact, and my students were thriving. I didn't need to live in a grand house or drive a fancy car to know that I was doing something meaningful. For the first time in my life, I felt truly fulfilled. Grandpa, on the other hand, had transformed completely. Where once he had been focused on accumulating wealth, he was now focused on something far more significant: the legacy he was leaving behind. He had become more than just a philanthropist. He was actively involved in the foundation. He attended events, met with students, and offered mentorship to anyone who needed it. I could see the pride in his eyes when he spoke about the impact we were making together. He would call me regularly not to discuss business, but to talk about the students we were helping and the lives we were changing. "You've done something remarkable, Sophia," he told me one afternoon. "You've shown me that true success isn't in buildings or bank accounts. It's in people. It's in the lives you touch and the futures you shape." I could feel the weight of his words settle into my chest. He had come to realize what I had always known, that wealth wasn't just about accumulating money, but about using it to do good in the world. And in that moment, I knew that everything had come full circle. Grandpa had spent his life building an empire, but now he was building something far more meaningful, a legacy of impact and compassion, and I had been the catalyst for that change. As I sat back in my apartment that evening, I reflected on how far I had come. From being the disappointment in the family to being the one who had shifted Grandpa's entire perspective, it was hard to believe how much had changed. I wasn't just teaching anymore. I was part of something bigger, and for the first time, I felt truly seen, not just by my family, but by myself. I had chosen a path that aligned with my values, and it had led me to something deeper than wealth: fulfillment. And that, I realized, was the greatest success of all. Grandpa's recognition of what truly mattered, the good we were doing, the lives we were changing, had been a turning point not just for him, but for all of us. He had built a fortune, but now he was investing in something that would last far beyond any bank account or property. And as we looked ahead, I knew that what we were creating together was a legacy that would outlast us all. It wasn't about the money, it was about the lives we touched and the difference we made. And that, in the end, was the truest form of success.